Texas seek recognition. Oh, pursuant to Clause 1C of Rule 19, further consideration on H.R. 1 will now resume. The clerk will report the title.
Union Calendar Number 302, H.R. 1, a bill to provide for reconciliation pursuant to Title II of the concurrent resolution on the budget for fiscal year 2018.
When proceedings were postponed earlier today, 29.5 minutes of debate remained on the bill. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Brady, has 17 minutes remaining, and without objection, the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Neal, has 12.5 minutes remaining. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes from the gentleman from Alaska, Mr. Young.
The gentleman from Alaska is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congress established the Alaska Native Settlement Trust in 1988 to provide permanent health, education, and welfare benefits to Alaska Natives who are among the most economically disadvantaged population in the United States. Unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, the tax code has many cases impeded the creation and funding of Alaska Native Trust settlements. As a result, Alaska Native Settlement Trusts have not been able to function in the manner Congress originally intended to provide benefits for Alaska Natives. To remedy some of these tax issues, I sponsored H.R. 3524, which permits the Alaska Native Corporation to deduct contributions to the settlement trusts. The provisions of H.R. 3524 were not included in H.R. 1, and the tax bill also adversely increases Alaska Native Settlement Trust tax rate from 10% to 12%. This would make it more difficult for the Alaska Native Trust to provide long-term benefits to Alaska Natives. I request that you include the provision of H.R. 3524 in the final conference report that results from the conference committee. Mr. Brady.
If the gentleman would yield, I am pleased to work with the gentleman from Alaska on this important issue for the Alaska Native community. Under the bill, Alaska Native Settlement Trust would be unintentionally subject to a slightly higher tax rate. I thank you for bringing this to my attention. I assure you I will focus on this in conference as we finalize individual rate structures between the House and Senate, and I also look forward to working with you to advance the provisions of your bill in this important area.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've been great to work with. Your staff has been outstanding. I thank you for your commitment for inclusion of H.R. 3524 and maintaining existing rates in law with regard to Alaska Native Settlement Trust, and more generally for your support of the Alaska Native community. Thank you,
sir.
The gentleman from Alaska's time has expired. The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself 4 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we wind down this debate on tax reform, or what we should really call it, a tax cut, I think that we should tabulate this as a missed opportunity. This could have been done between the two parties, and instead, much of this was constructed without any Democratic input. Reminder, in 1986, the Historic Tax Reform Act included President Reagan and Speaker O'Neill, Chairman Rostenkowski, Dick Gephardt, and Bill Bradley. And in this instance here, 32 years later, not one hearing was held on this tax bill that is about to be voted on in the next 45 minutes. The significance of that is that there was never any back and forth. And in 1986, expert testimony was sought from 450 witnesses. We had not one witness who commented on the legislation. It's been advertised as a middle-class tax cut. Where did you get the bill? How can you say that this is a middle-class tax cut and compare that to repeal of the estate tax? How many middle-class people in America pay the estate tax? That's how many people pay the estate tax. No middle-class American pays the estate tax. There is no such thing as a death tax. In addition to which, a middle-class tax cut is described as doing away with the alternative minimum tax. 4.5 million families pay alternative minimum tax in America. That's it. I fixed the problem years ago for the middle class, and 27 million people stopped paying AMT. So now we're down to people at the very top. So how are we paying for this, or how are they paying for it better? Because you're not going to get much help on this side. Well, they've decided that that teacher who used to have $250 that they could deduct on their income taxes, that's going to be abolished. So if you have Alzheimer's and you exceed the 10% number in terms of cost in your health care for caring for that loved one at home who's sick or has dementia, that's how they're going to pay for the tax cut. They're going to take that away. State and local property taxes, they're going to take them away, the deduction. They're going to pare back the mortgage interest deduction. All of this advertised on the basis of a middle-class tax cut? People at the bottom end are not going to get much from this tax cut. I want to take you back again, as I have repeatedly, because I've cast 3 great votes in this House during my 29 years against the Iraq War, and there weren't many of us, and against the cuts in 2001 to the tax system in 2003, all advertised as pro-growth economics. There was no economic growth from the tax cuts of 2001, which totaled, by the way, $1.3 trillion. And for people who said at the time, everybody gets a tax cut, they were correct. Then you look at the distribution tables, see what people got at the top and then what people got at the bottom. And then we came back in 2003 and cut another $1 trillion in taxes, advertised as pro-growth economics. Zippo growth occurred. And then, by the way, the granddaddy of them all, how about repatriation? Repatriation, bringing back those earnings to the United States for investment and job growth. And, by the way, 5 1/4 was the tax burden they carried, all based on job growth. It was for stock buybacks, dividends, and layoffs. We had a chance here to do something historic. We had a chance here in this debate and discussion because there's a genuine affability on that committee. We had this opportunity to take the tax code and transform it for the gig economy in the modern age. We didn't do that, though. 4 days we had to examine this tax proposal with no hearings. Not one chance for a Democratic amendment
has expired.
to proceed.
The gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for as much time as he may consume.
Mr. Speaker, this historic legislation before us today represents a crucial step to fulfilling our tax reform promise to the American people. But it's not the final step. We're Republicans. We believe the tax code doesn't belong to Washington, it belongs to the American people. We'll continue to work to make it better and improve at every step of the way. And before I make final remarks, I want to thank all of our Ways and Means members who have done so much and worked so hard, as well as every member of this House who helped make this opportunity real for the American people. I also want to say how grateful I am to everyone at the Nonpartisan Joint Committee on Taxation and the House Office of Legislative Counsel. Their work, their careful analysis contributed so much to this bill. Finally, I want to give special recognition to Barbara Angus, our Chief Tax Counsel, Ways and Means, and all of our staff on the committee. They put their hearts and their souls and many sleepless nights in the development of this bill. I can't thank them enough for their hard work and dedication. Mr. Speaker, the House of Representatives is by its very design the chamber of Congress closest to the American people. And today this House, the People's House, will pass historic legislation to improve the lives of Americans nationwide. For too long, this broken tax code has put the needs of the people second, propping up Washington's special interests at the expense of hardworking Americans. For too long, this broken tax code has rewarded companies for outsourcing American jobs instead of encouraging them to create jobs here at home. For too long, this broken tax code has eroded America's economic leadership around the world. You know, this country used to be the standard bearer worldwide for competitive tax systems. Not anymore. Now the United States is barely a speck in the rearview mirrors of so many of our international competitors. In our businesses, our workers, our made-in-America products, which are the best in the world, are bearing the consequences of Washington's failure to act. That stops now. And it stops with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. With this historic bill, we'll provide real simplicity for every taxpayer. We'll deliver real fairness to every hardworking American. We'll be more competitive than ever. We will win worldwide and here at home as well. And we'll see better jobs and bigger paychecks in every community of this great nation, so people can keep more of their hard-earned dollars. With this bill, we will deliver a new tax code built for a new era of American prosperity. So, to Washington special interests who are now being propped up by absurd carve-outs and loopholes, get ready to stand on your own. To our international competitors who are now leading the pack, get ready to have some company. And to the American people who've waited years for tax reform, get ready for the tax relief you deserve. Today, this House, the People's House, is taking action on the most transformational tax overhaul in a generation, and we're taking action today. It's time for this old broken tax code to go. It's time to put the American people first. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman from Texas yields back. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of our time.
The gentleman
Balance
is
of my time.
The gentleman is recognized.
2.5 minutes, I believe, Mr. Speaker.
8.5.
Well, 2.5 to me, I'm going to yield then.
That's fine.
Okay.
The gentleman is recognized for 2.5.
So let me acknowledge the superb Democratic tax staff that are here as well. Kara Getz, Karen McAfee, Aruna Kalyananam, Peg McGlinch, Deva Kyle, G. Pritchard, and Suzanne Walsh. They did a magnificent job as well, and we're all much dependent on the good staff work, particularly, I think, on the Ways and Means Committee. So I spoke earlier of the missed opportunity that we have here. We have a real problem in America with labor participation rates. 6 million jobs go unanswered every day now in America. 18,000 precision manufacturing jobs in New England, 1 million tech jobs, because skill sets don't align with the job opportunities that are out there. 2 million Americans sit home with opiate addictions that should be in the workforce. This was a chance to invest in human capital as well, to invest in our community colleges, to invest in apprenticeship programs, and yes, the other challenge that we have in America is clearly to invest in vocational education for many of the jobs that are available. Instead, we pushed that all to the side and decided that once again, if we just had tax cuts, then all of these challenges and problems would go away. The idea of investing in the human side of American opportunity is then people do what we would like them to do in terms of home buying and raising families and caring for neighborhoods and practicing an art form of citizenship. But once again, what we're witnessing today, and we need to be alarmed about it, is the greater and greater concentration of wealth in America. Now, I understand it's complicated. It has to do much with technology and globalization, but it's also about the gig economy, and we today reward capital more than we reward labor. And when we get done, if they are successful on the other side, we are going to further concentrate wealth amongst those few families in America. We serve here in the House of Representatives, not in the House of Lords. This is not about peerage where you're entitled to a seat in this House of Representatives. That's what's wrong. That's what Jefferson and Madison envisioned when they signed those bonds of the Declaration of Independence and the American Constitution to break with Europe. We don't practice divine right here. I wish the outcome here today, Mr. Speaker, would have been more genuine and it would have been different. Thank you.
The gentleman from Texas is now recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I am proud to yield 3 minutes to our majority whip and a tremendous leader in tax reform, gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise.
The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my friend and colleague from Texas. Chairman Brady has done an incredible job at bringing this tax cuts and jobs bill to the House floor. And today's an historic day, Mr. Speaker, for families who for so long have been calling out saying that they want to pay less in taxes. We answered that call today, Mr. Speaker. When you've heard the complaints, as myself and so many others have, every time we see a company move more jobs overseas, good high-paying jobs overseas, because America has the highest tax rate in the industrialized world, we finally do something about that today, Mr. Speaker, by cutting the corporate rates so that we can be competitive again and so that we can bring those jobs back home. Let's talk about something else that's going to be a benefit to hardworking families in this bill, Mr. Speaker. We finally simplify the tax code in a way that over 90% of American families will actually be able to do their taxes on a postcard. Just think of how much that's going to save for people that have to pay to have their taxes done because the code is so complicated and has become so massive that nobody can figure it out. We simplify the code. But let's go through those things. We lower tax rates. Everybody's going to see lower tax rates at every income level. We double the standard deduction from $12,000 to $24,000 that every family can take advantage of now. That doubled standard deduction is going to be a big win for hardworking families that are struggling. We eliminate special interest loopholes, Mr. Speaker. You might hear a lot of complaints out there from people who have been able to get their little piece of the tax code. The problem is every time somebody gets a special interest loophole, it costs the rest of us. Now we get rid of those loopholes so that everybody can pay less in taxes. That's a big win for hardworking families. Mr. Speaker, in our bill, we completely repeal the death tax, probably one of the most immoral parts of our code, where small businesses, family farms, if their loved one dies, the first thing they're thinking is grieving for their loved one. But immediately after, they get a big tax bill from the federal government that in many cases forces them to sell their small business instead of passing it on to their family. That's part of the American dream. They pay taxes on it. We repeal the death tax. We deliver a much fairer code, Mr. Speaker. But again, what this bill is about is finally putting more money in the pockets of hardworking families. It's about getting our economy moving again and creating jobs. Families recognize when they see the highest corporate tax rate in the industrialized world, tens of thousands of jobs, going to countries like Ireland and Canada. Look, I love Ireland and I love Canada. I just don't want them to have tens of thousands of our good jobs. Let's bring those jobs back. In our bill, we do that, Mr. Speaker. This bill is a win for hardworking families. This puts money back in the pockets of people who have been struggling so long, and it allows the economic growth that's going to see wages finally increase. After 10 years of a stagnant economy, it's about time we finally answer the call that millions of Americans have been asking us to do for so long, Mr. Speaker. Let's pass the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and get our economy moving again. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Texas reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And with that, I'd like to yield 5 minutes to a very capable legislator, the Democratic whip, Mr. Hoyer, for 5 minutes.
The gentleman from Maryland is now recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. This is the most irresponsible bill that I will have been confronted with in the 37 years that I have been in the Congress of the United States. This bill, Mr. Speaker, is both reckless and feckless. It is reckless because it would add more than $1.7 trillion, the chairman says over $2 trillion, to the debt over a decade in a shameful act of hypocrisy for its supporters who for years have called for fiscal responsibility. It is feckless because its authors write it with an eye towards politics, not policy. There is no courage in voting for this bill. It is easy to vote for a tax cut. What is hard to do is paying for what we buy. And neither side does that particularly well. There is no courage in voting for this bill, only a suspension of common sense and their now abandoned commitment to fiscal sustainability. Furthermore, my Republican friends call this bill a tax cut. The gentleman who just spoke, the whip, said it's a reduction in rates. But 36 million working Americans will receive a tax increase under this bill. So it was a very careful articulation of reduction of rates. But taxes for 36 million Americans, working Americans, will go up. Furthermore, they call this bill a tax cut. It's not a stretch of the imagination to presume that, given Republicans' urgency to reject bipartisan compromise and deflect public input, the members of this House will be asked to accept whatever version of the tax bill can pass the United States Senate. Yesterday, the Senate Finance Committee, listen to me, my colleagues, the Senate Finance Committee rejected this bill 36-0. The Senate Finance Committee, headed by Republicans, rejected this bill 36-0. I am reminded of what Representative Matt Gaetz, a Republican, said last month about the budget resolution that teed up this tax plan. He said that we were being, and I quote, asked to vote for a budget that nobody believes in, so that we have a chance to vote for a tax bill that nobody's read. I won't ask you to raise your hand if you've read this bill. 1, those who take this vote will have to live with it. And just hope that whatever mystery tax package your Senate colleagues send over here won't gut whatever concessions you've extracted. I heard the whip say no special provisions in this bill. I don't have the time to go through every special provision that has been used to get people to vote for this bill. Mr. Speaker, this isn't the tax reform the American people were promised, or the tax reform that American people want. Let's sit down together. Let's sit down together, Mr. Chairman. You and Mr. Neal, two responsible, good Americans. Sit down together, not in a partisan way, but in a bipartisan way. That's the way we did the 86 bill. That was why it was such a responsible piece of legislation. Let's enact tax reform that focuses on the working class, the middle class, the people who need the money, not give over half of it to the richest people in America. I don't have any beef with them. We'd all like to be rich. But they don't need a tax cut, and the middle class does. Why give 50% of the revenue to them? Let's enact tax reform that focuses on them. Let's enact tax reform that doesn't give half the benefit to those making more than $900,000 a year. Let's enact tax reform that improves our long-term fiscal position, rather than adding the $1.7 trillion to our debt that the CBO projects that this bill would add. As former Treasury Secretary Robert Rubin pointed out in an op-ed in today's Washington Post, and by the way, he was the Secretary of Treasury during the only 4 years of balanced budgets that we have experienced in the last 50 years. May I have one additional minute?
The gentleman's time has expired.
Vote no on this bill. Look to your souls, not your polls,
Gentleman's
or
time
your
has
political
expired.
accounts. Reject this sellout of
Gentleman's
America's
time has
future.
expired. The gentleman is no
Vote
longer recognized. The gentleman from Texas is now recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm honored to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from California, our majority leader and a champion for tax reform, Mr. McCarthy.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and before I begin, I want to thank the gentleman. I want to thank him for all those Americans out there that have waited decades for this, for the hours that you have listened, for the numerous hearings you have gone through to get us to this day. Now, Mr. Speaker, I stand before this body, but I want to speak to the people watching us at home right now and who will hear us in the hours and days to come. I want to speak to the people who stretch their budgets to get to the next paycheck. I want to speak to the people who are starting to wonder if the American promise no longer applies to them. You need a comeback. America needs a comeback. If we are successful today and the weeks to come, you will keep more of the money that you earned. You will have more in your paycheck. Your life will improve. If we succeed, you will succeed. But if the leaders and obstructionists on the other side of the aisle win, you will lose. You see, they want Washington insiders and bureaucrats to keep more of your hard-earned income. They think it's theirs to spend. We think it's yours. Now, I've tried my best to understand their opposition. And I've listened to the pessimistic leaders of a party that once upon a time claimed they stood for the common man. Without a shred of evidence, they are certain our plan won't work. They drum up a stale argument from 30 years ago, saying all this bill does is help the rich. They call it a middle-class tax hike. That same paper our colleague just held also has fact checkers. But the fact checkers gave them not one, not two, not even three. The most Pinocchios you can give, 4 for that lie. Every honest person sees this as a tax cut for hardworking Americans. This bill increases the child tax credit, increases the standard deduction, increases wages, and is already bringing back jobs to America. The fact is, the first $55,000 an average family of 4 earns will not face a single penny of income tax. Not a single penny. So what are these party leaders defending by their opposition? It's not the people. After all, there's not a single person I've ever met in this nation that wants higher rates, lower wages, fewer jobs, and a more complicated tax code. No, they aren't defending the people. They're defending loopholes for the special interest, corporate welfare, and carve-outs for lobbyists. They're defending the abusive tactics of a status quo in the IRS. And you know what I find most absurd? They're defending the reckless tax and spend of broken states across this country. They have made it their mission to increase taxes on our fellow citizens. And my friends on the other side of the aisle, they have the audacity to call this a tax increase. In the end, they're defending a broken status quo. You know what I think, Mr. Speaker? I think that voting no on a plan that lowers taxes, higher wages, and more jobs, and a simpler system, that isn't about Republicans and Democrats. Voting no is telling the American people you do not have faith in them to rise if they're given a fair shot. Well, Mr. Speaker, I have a simple question for this House and for everyone who's watching at home. Do you want higher taxes and less money in your pockets? Or do you want lower taxes and more money? I think we sent a message to the doubters and the critics. The American people do not want hard work to be punished. We do not accept decline. We do not accept that Washington knows how to spend our money better than we do. So I have a different message for the American people. To those trying to find a job, that long search is coming to an end. This is your comeback. To those sick of just getting by and fighting for a raise, this is your comeback. To those struggling to keep your small business afloat, to pay your employees, to help your neighborhood, this is your comeback. To every American who ever dreamed of being an entrepreneur and owning a small business, this is your comeback. To every mother and father starting a family, raising your kids and trying to give them more of an opportunity than you ever had, this is your comeback. Now, I put hope in the American people. This bill puts hope in our American people. Because we trust the people. That's the start of America's comeback. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair reminds all members to address their remarks to the chair and not to the perceived audience. The House will come to order. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Always an honor to introduce the very capable Democratic leader, the gentlelady from California, Ms. Pelosi.
The gentlelady from California is recognized.
For 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding and thank him for his superb leadership as the top Democrat on the Ways and Means Committee. I commend him and all of our fellow Democrats on the committee for standing up for the middle class in our country and fighting for the truth in what is in this bill. Mr. Speaker, this vote today is a defining moment for our country. Our votes today will decide the future of the American middle class and those who aspire to it, the future of our children and our grandchildren, the future of the United States of America as the land of opportunity. Today, the Republicans have brought forth a bill that is pillaging the middle class to pad the pockets of the wealthiest and hand tax breaks to corporations shipping jobs out of America and drastically increasing the national debt. My colleagues, the bill Republicans have brought to the floor today is not tax reform. It's not even a tax cut. It is a tax scam. So many people have written in about it who are affected by it, and I'll submit all of that for the record. But I do want to say that this is not only a defining moment, it is a moment of truth. With straight faces and with the speed of light, I have to give them credit. They raced this thing through in the dark of night. They're trying to sell a bill of goods to the middle class that this is in their interest, that this is a middle-income tax cut. According to the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center, Republicans are raising taxes on 36 million middle-class families. 36 million.
The gentlelady will suspend. The gentleman is correct.
Typical of the Republicans, they don't want you to hear what I have to say as I speak truth.
The gentlelady will suspend until the House comes to order. The gentlelady can continue.
I associate myself with the very wonderful comments of our distinguished House Democratic whip, Mr. Hoyer, especially at the end, when he said, look to your soul, not to your polls. I want to speak to Pope Benedict, his encyclical, God is Love. It was his first encyclical as Pope. And in that encyclical, Pope Benedict quoted the wisdom of St. Augustine. 17 centuries ago, St. Augustine said, a state which is not governed according to justice would be just a bunch of thieves. Benedict went on to say, the state must inevitably face the question of how justice can be achieved here and now. And he cautioned against the danger of certain ethical blindness caused by the dazzling effect of power and special interest. Interesting in light of the fact that when this bill is brought forward, the Director of National Economic Council, Gary Cohen, he said the most excited group out there are the big CEOs about our tax plan. Is that about justice? Congressman Chris Collins said, my donors are basically saying, get it done or don't ever call me again. Senator Lindsey Graham said, the financial contributions will stop if this tax scam fails. Well, he didn't say scam. I'm saying scam. That's my word. Back to the Pope and the Catholic bishops. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops wrote, this proposal appears to be the first federal income tax modification in American history that will raise income taxes on the working poor while simultaneously providing a large tax cut to the wealthy. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops went on to say, this is simply unconscionable. My colleagues, we always begin our session with prayer, and many of us attend Mass on the weekend on Sundays. But we cannot pray and think that that gives us a lesson to pray on people the rest of the week. And that is what this bill does. It preys on the middle class and those aspire to it. It pillages and loots the middle class. It is a shameful piece of legislation, and the Republicans should know better. They say it's going to get better in the Senate. Oh, my gosh. In the Senate, as Mr. Hoyer pointed out, unanimously the Senate Finance Committee rejected this proposal already. Was it 26-0, whatever the number was, the zero loomed large. Getting back to values, because that's what we're here to do, and what we do in our budget, which is the tax bill is a part of. It's supposed to be a statement of values. In his study of civilization, the great British historian Arnold Toynbee found at the beginning of a hopeful country, the political leadership formed a creative minority that inspired and led the flowering of civilization. But in some nations, leaders became a dominant minority of exploiters, focused on their own wealth and power. Arnold Toynbee, welcome to the Republican side of the aisle in Congress. These competing mindsets, he went on, between the dominant minority of exploiters versus the creative minority that inspired and led the flowering of civilization, these competing mindsets and motivations create schisms in a body social and schisms in the soul of the body politic. And lo and behold, the Republican Party has written a bill. Nearly half the benefits go to the top 1%. Top 1% in our country, and 80% of the benefits go to the top 2%. This is a moment, a defining moment, but it's also a moment of truth. How can the Republicans with a straight face say to the middle class, well, we're doubling this or doubling that, give with one hand, take with another? And to hear them cheer for the provision in here about the estate tax, listen to this. You tell me if you think this is fair. 1,800 families in America, not your family farmer that everybody's taken care of in what we have done already with the estate tax. In this bill, 1,800 of the wealthiest families, the filers in our country, will, in the life of the bill, get the break of $172 billion. 1,800 families. This is for 1,800 families. And you know what? The Republicans cheered that. 1,800 families are going to get $172 billion. They cheer the fact that $1.25 up to $1.5 trillion in tax cuts goes to corporate America, while at the same time giving them another tax break to send jobs overseas, at the same time absolving them of any responsibility when it comes to state and local taxes, while insisting that individuals pay the state and local, lose the state and local tax deduction, but corporations do not. And listen to all of it. Were they cheering when they're saying to a teacher, here they're cheering when they say to a teacher, you may bring supplies to your school because your school and classes need that. God bless you for that. But we're taking away your the tax deduction that goes with that. What? Is that something to cheer about? They're saying to students who get a $2,500 tax deduction on interest on student loans, forget about that. Even though it may make the difference between your attending college or not, forget about that. We're too busy giving a tax cut to the 1,800 wealthiest families in America so they can get $172 billion in tax breaks over the next 10 years. They're saying to families, whether they have a child with a disability, a senior with Alzheimer's, and everything in between, if you have extraordinary medical expenses, and since 1944, you have been able to deduct them no more, because we got to give it to the high end. So take that away. Do you have any idea what that means to America's working families and what it means for them if they have Alzheimer's? We had one person come to our event in San Francisco last week from Barbara Lee's district. She said it cost almost over $170,000 in cost for her because her husband has Alzheimer's. The tax deduction enabled them to survive. She said, I can't even imagine the cruelty that decided that this should happen in this tax bill. So understand what this means in people's lives and tell the truth about it. Tell the truth about it. Republicans want you to believe that their trickle-down tax break for the rich will pay for itself. Never has happened. Never has happened. As Bruce Bartlett, architect of Jack Hunt's supply-side economics, said, it's not true that this trickle-down economics pays for itself. It's not true. It's nonsense. And he went on to say it was BS in the full extent of those words. This tax scam won't create jobs. It won't raise wages. It will only fill the coffers of the donors and the fat cats. The GOP tax scam will add trillions to the debt and stick our children with a bill that you cannot pay off. And none of us will probably be around by the time the full impact of the hemorrhaging of the debt in the second 10 years of this bill will require big tax increases. Look to the Kansas example.
The gentleman is correct. The House will come to order.
I thank the gentleman.
Gentlelady will still continue to pause.
Maybe I'll have
The
to use my
gentlelady will
mother
still
of
continue.
five voice so that you will listen.
The gentlelady will continue to pause. The member has made a valid point, and the chair will get the House in order before the gentlelady continues.
As I always like to say,
Gentlelady
in
will
my own
now
caucus,
continue.
Mr. Speaker, maybe I have to use my mother of five voice to be heard. But as a mother of five and a grandmother of 9, we're supposed to be thinking about our children and their futures, and our grandchildren and their futures. God willing, one day some of you will have grandchildren. I always ask you the question, do they breathe air? Do they drink water? Why are you messing that up in other areas of our policy making here? But getting back to this, the tax scam won't create jobs. It won't raise wages, as I said. It will only fill the coffers of donors and the fat cats. The GOP tax scam will add trillions to the debt. Oh, where are the deficit hawks? Have you become extinct? Is there not one among you who understands what this does to the national debt? And with all due respect to your leader, for him to put at our doorstep the debt when it was a creation, President Bush went into office on a path from President Clinton of deficit reduction. The last 5 Clinton budgets were in balance or in surplus. President Bush turned that around by repealing pay-as-you-go, tax cuts for the wealthy, didn't trickle down, 2 unpaid fair wars, give away to the pharmaceutical industry, taking us to a place, remember September of 2008, when we were in the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. But anyway, back to here. As Republicans know, our Republican friends have already shown us their playbook. In this bill, corporations will get a cut of $1.5 trillion, the same $1.5 trillion that Republicans plan to slash from Medicare and Medicaid in the GOP budget. In their bones, the American people know they're getting a raw deal under the Republican bill before us. You know it. You know why you're here. You know what you're doing. Democrats believe the American people deserve a better deal, better jobs, better wages, better future. We want to create good-paying jobs, raise workers' wages, lower the cost of living for families, give Americans the tools they need to succeed in the 21st century, but you can't do that if you have a budget that does not invest in that future and is hampered by the cuts. Let's go back to the drawing board. Let's write a bipartisan bill that raises wages, creates jobs, promotes growth, reduces the deficit. But to get to that place, we would want to go to the table in a bipartisan way. What are you afraid of? In a bipartisan way, to put together a tax bill that is good for the American people instead of one that does violence to the American dream. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to vote no and to demand a better bill for America's working families. And I want to return to the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops to put their fabulous statement about this tax bill in the record. And I return to one of their statements. This proposal appears to be the first federal income tax modification in American history that will raise income taxes on the working poor while simultaneously providing a large tax cut for the wealthy. And the Senate is not going to make it better. They have already said they're raising taxes on those making under $75,000 and giving tax cuts to the wealthy. They've already said they're going to take affordable care away from 13 million Americans. I don't know how that's making it better. That might be something you applaud, but I certainly hope you would not vote for it. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back. The chair would remind all speakers to direct their comments to the chair and not in second person. The gentleman from Texas is now recognized.
Mr. Speaker, no one man has plowed the field for tax reform for more years, more boldly, or more effectively than the gentleman from Wisconsin. I'm pleased and proud to yield 1 minute to the Speaker of the House, Mr. Ryan.
Yeah.
I haven't said anything yet. Thank you. Speaker, the House is not in order.
The House come to order, and the gentleman from Wisconsin is now recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, first, I love this 1 minute, and I try not to abuse it too much, but I'm going to right now. Mr. Speaker, I want to start off by thanking Chairman Kevin Brady and all of the members of the House Ways and Means Committee for this job well done. Mr. Speaker, we are in a generational defining moment for our country. And what we're doing here is not just determining the kind of tax code we're going to have. What we are doing here is determining the kind of country we're going to have. And right now, because of this anemic economic recovery, I mean, don't forget, we had the worst recession in our lifetimes in 2008. And ever since then, this economy has been flat. This economy has been way under its potential. This economy has been growing at a limp 1 to 2%. And you know what that means for hardworking taxpayers? You know what that means for Americans? Nobody gets a wage increase. Living standards are stagnant. Economic anxiety is high. 78% of our workers in this country today are living paycheck to paycheck. Most Americans say that they don't even have $500 in their bank account for an unexpected emergency or an expense. This is the economic anxiety that's for real in this country today. Instead of thinking about getting ahead, families are just struggling to get by. Think about all the moms and the dads and the hardworking taxpayers going to bed tonight not sleeping, worried about what comes next week. This is not how it should be. This is not how it is in this country traditionally. We need to restore growth. We need to restore opportunity. We need to restore this beautiful thing we affectionately call the American idea. Passing this bill is the single biggest thing we can do to grow the economy, to restore opportunity, and help these middle-income families who are struggling. People always ask, well, what's in it for me? You know, how do I benefit from this? Well, I'm a chart guy. Why is this important? What this shows you, under this plan, the average family at every income level gets a tax cut. A tax cut at every average level. And what this chart shows you, the people here who are struggling, the people here who are in middle income brackets, the people here who are low income trying to become middle income, they get the biggest tax cut. This plan is good for people of all walks of life, all across the country, and the bigger relief goes to those who need it most. Let's put it into numbers. A typical household of 4 people, they make $59,000 in this country. That family of 4, $1,182 tax cut first year alone. The median family income, mom, dad, 2 kids, The median family income in America today is $87,000. That family will get a $1,941 tax cut right away, year one. So if you're one of those 57% of Americans who say you don't even have $500 to go to an emergency, this really helps you. Let's talk about those people who itemize their taxes, who live in high tax states. Let's talk about maybe a couple making $115,000, living in a high tax state. Let's say they've got $8,400 in a mortgage interest payment and $6,900 in property taxes for the year. They can still write all of those off under this plan, and they will still see a tax cut of $1,130. If they got kids, an even larger tax cut. Not only do people get to keep more of their own money in their own pocket, but we dramatically simplify the tax system. We make it more fair. Today, 7 out of 10 Americans don't itemize their deductions. That means 70% of Americans take what we call the standard deduction for their taxes. And it's just that. It's standard. It's straightforward. You're not taxed on that income. But over the years, Washington has piled on special interest loophole after special interest loophole after special interest loophole. And these loopholes are skewed to the people who are wealthy, who are well-connected, who can afford all the tax lawyers and all the accountants to navigate the tax code so they can get a good deal. But if you're not in that group, if you don't have the lawyers and the accountants, and you're just scraping away in your middle income, you don't get those deals. So what we want to do is take those loopholes away, make it fair for everybody, lower tax rates, and make it easy. Here's how easy this gets. We're going to make it so easy that by doubling the standard deduction, 90% of Americans, 9 out of 10 Americans will be able to fill out their taxes on a form the size of a postcard. And what this means is, for a single person, you don't pay taxes on your first $12,000 of income. For a couple, for a married couple, you don't pay taxes on your first $24,000 of income. And here's the basic philosophy. Instead of jumping through all the hoops that the IRS puts in front of you, instead of doing what the special interest groups say you need to do in order to get some of your money back, we basically say, keep your money in the first place. It's your money. Do what you want with it. All of this is about tax relief. It's about fairness. It's about simplicity. It's about easing the stress and anxiety that's in this country. But what we really need to do is we need better jobs, more jobs, faster economic growth, higher wages. And this brings us to the way we tax ourselves as businesses. This brings us to, what do we do to make America the most competitive place in the world? Here is the real problem we've got when it comes to the way we tax our businesses. We're the worst in the world at it. We right now tax our businesses at the highest corporate tax rate in the industrialized world. What does that do? Well, let me give you an example where I come from. In Wisconsin, the example is Johnson Controls. Johnson Controls is a company with a history dating back in our state to the 1880s. It was the biggest company we had headquartered in Wisconsin. Not anymore, because Johnson Controls is an Irish company, and their Irish tax rate is 12.5%. This is happening all over the country. Companies, just to stay competitive, are becoming foreign companies. And when the headquarters of that company leaves your hometown, when the headquarters of that business and that employer leaves your state and goes to another country, there goes the United Way campaign. There goes the white-collar jobs. There goes the manufacturing. There goes the research and development. There goes America's competitiveness. What's worse is all these foreign companies are buying U.S. companies because it's cheaper because of taxes. So here's what we do. Instead of being the worst in the pack, we leapfrog ourselves by bringing that tax rate down to 20%. Because guess what? When you tax your businesses at much, much higher tax rates than our foreign competitors tax theirs, they win and we lose. We got to stop losing. We got to start winning. That's what this does. What's even more impressive about this is it lowers taxes for those small businesses, those mom and pops, even more. So we got to make sure that our businesses, the job creators of America, have every incentive to stay here, have every incentive to build here, have every incentive to hire here. And what's more, we're finding that by doing this, we're going to get faster economic growth. We're going to get more jobs. We're going to get higher wages, better take-home pay. Let me just break it down in simple numbers. Tax Foundation, they ran the numbers. Nonpartisan Tax Foundation said, with this bill, we'll get faster growth, about 3.5% faster economic growth, about 890,000 new jobs. They estimate that in New York State alone, 57,834 new jobs. Wisconsin, 17,999 new jobs. California, 422,000 new jobs. Texas, 74,037 new jobs. And you get these new jobs when you grow this economy. You pass this bill, you grow this economy. And so why do we do all of this? Because it's about giving people more take-home pay. It's about raising wages. It's about helping families who are struggling to get ahead. It's about getting Washington out of the business of picking winners and losers and giving the American people the kind of economy they deserve, the kind of economy we can have. This just shows you that across every income scale, across the board, wages will go up because we're going to grow the economy. And most of the wage growth goes to the people who need it most, people who are in the middle, people who are struggling. That is why we're here. My colleagues, right now, we're in the middle of a long day where people are working tooth and nail in their jobs. We are right here in the middle of a day where America's workers are trying to figure out how they're going to make ends meet, how they're trying to keep up with everything. Those people, the hardworking taxpayers of this country that we represent, that is why we're here. This is why we're doing this. They are the foundation of this country. We're here today for them. The special interests are trying to protect their piece of the pie. All the negativity you see out there, there's probably a special interest group back there trying to keep their special niche in the tax code. It is fine time. It is high time we root that out. We don't settle for the status quo, and we give people the kind of tax code that they need and they deserve. It has been 31 years since we last did this, and it is finally time that we get the general interests of this country to prevail over the special interests in Washington. So we know that this brings more fairness. We know that this increases take-home pay and bigger paychecks. And we know that this grows the economy and creates more opportunities. Faster economic growth is not going to fix every problem America has. But faster economic growth is going to help us solve every problem America has. My colleagues, I ask you today to raise your gaze and do something bold, to see the forest through the trees, to think about the people we are here to actually represent, to think about the people who are struggling, who are going to go to bed tonight and probably not sleep because they're worried about what's going to happen tomorrow. That's what this is. This is one of the most historic and the biggest things that we will ever do. And the reason is because this is one of the biggest things we can do to improve people's lives, to revitalize that beautiful American idea, to spread liberty and freedom. This is something that's going to refresh our confidence in ourselves and our confidence in each other. Enough settling, enough giving in. Let's start to reclaim our future right here, in this moment, in this chamber, in this moment. Let's pass this bill. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas. Does the gentleman from Texas yield back his time?
I do yield back,
The
Mr.
gentleman from
Speaker.
Texas yield back his time. All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 619, the previous question is ordered on the bill as amended. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
Union Calendar number 302, H.R. 1, a bill to provide for reconciliation pursuant to Title II of the concurrent resolution on the budget for fiscal year 2018.
The question is on the passage of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker.
Massachusetts rise.
I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those in favor vote by the yeas and nays will rise. Sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the 15-minute vote on the passage of the bill will be followed by a 5-minute vote on suspending the rules and passing H.R. 3109 if ordered. This is a 15-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 227, the nays are 205. The bill is passed. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The chair will remind all persons of the gallery that they are here as guests of the House and that the manifestation of approval or disapproval of proceedings is a violation of the rules of the House.
The unfinished business on the question suspending the rules and passing H.R. 3109, which the clerk will report by title.
H.R. 3109, a bill to designate the facility of the United States Postal Service located at 1114 North 2nd Street in Chillicothe, Illinois, as the Senior Chief Ryan Owens Post Office Building.
Did she read? The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? So many as are in favor, say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed. And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The chair announces the Speaker's appointment pursuant to 2 U.S.C. 2081 and the order of the House of January 30, 2017 of the following member on the part of the House to the United States Capitol Preservation Commission.
Mrs. Comstock of Virginia.
The chair lays before the House the following communication.
The Honorable, the Speaker, House of Representatives, sir, pursuant to Section 5 of the Frederick Douglass Bicentennial Commission Act, Public Law 115-77, I am pleased to appoint the following member to serve as a commissioner to the Frederick Douglass Bicentennial Commission. The Honorable Eleanor Holmes Norton of Washington, District of Columbia, and from private life, Mr. Kenneth B. Morris, Jr. of Orange County, California. Thank you for your attention to these recommendations. Signed sincerely, Nancy Pelosi, Democratic Leader.
The House will come to order. Take your conversations out. For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to meet at 10 a.m. tomorrow.
Without objection.
Have a great Thanksgiving.
You also.
Thank you.
Please come to order. We're going to have 1 minute. Please come to order. Take your conversations outside, please. Thank you. The House will come to order. The chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota stand up? I'm sorry, Montana.
Seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection. Please come to order. Conversations outside, please. The gentleman from Montana is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act will increase paychecks for hardworking Montanans and create Montana jobs and unleash economic growth. In fact, analysis from the Nonpartisan Tax Foundation finds the bill will create nearly 2,900 Montana jobs and will increase...
Please take your conversations outside. The House needs to be in order. The gentleman from Montana may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act will increase paychecks for hardworking Montanans and create Montana jobs and unleash economic growth. In fact, analysis from the Nonpartisan Tax Foundation finds the bill will create nearly 2,900 Montana jobs and will increase income for median Montana households by $2,200. Hardworking Montanans will see a big tax break by cutting their rates and by doubling the standard deduction. Montana families will benefit from the increased child tax credit. Today, only about 1 in 4 Montanans itemize their deductions, filling out stacks of paperwork for hours after saving piles of receipts. With tax reform, these days are over. Under the new plan, 9 out of 10 Americans won't have to itemize and see their full tax benefit, and will file their taxes on something like a postcard. I'm proud to vote for the tax reform that will create thousands of Montanan jobs, ensure hardworking Montanans keep more of what they earn, and help small business. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and with that, I yield back.
This gentleman from Arizona, arise.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to support Small Business Saturday on November 25th. Small Business Saturday takes place every year on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. It is a day for Americans to support their community and their local businesses. As a former small business owner myself, I know the value that our small, locally owned businesses add to our small local economies. Arizona is proud home to more than 500,000 small businesses that employ nearly 1 million Arizonans. These small businesses are the lifeblood of our local economies, and they are vital to the future of our communities. Our entrepreneurs are local community leaders. They hire local employees, and they contribute to local causes. This holiday shopping season, we have the chance to show appreciation for our local businesses and all they do for our communities. I encourage all Americans to get out and shop at your favorite local small business or dine at your favorite local restaurant and support Small Business Saturday on November 25th. And I yield. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas arise? You are recognized.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I'll rise in support of H.R. 1, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. With Chairman Brady's leadership, my colleagues and I worked hard to combine our ideas to help Americans across the nation have lower taxes, better careers, and more money in their family budget. Over the past year, it's been a collaborative effort. I've listened to and worked with people and businesses on their ideas about tax reform from all across the 2nd Congressional District of Arkansas. With today's vote, we're one step closer to reforming our broken tax code. Over the past several months, we've worked to reduce taxes on families and let them keep more of their money. For businesses, we want to have a more competitive tax system that promotes investment, which will spur our economic growth and our family prosperity. According to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, H.R. 1 will raise after-tax incomes for hardworking Arkansans by over $2,000. Furthermore,
H.R. 1 benefits families by increasing the child tax credit to $1,600 from $1,000. That helps over 50,000 taxpayers in my district, Mr. Speaker. By passing this bill could lead to the creation of an additional 5,000 jobs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
I ask the chamber to be quiet, please. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition? Without objection, you are recognized for 1 minute.
Speaker, I rise for a very sad task as we begin this season of Thanksgiving to announce the passing of my dear friend, Steve Mostyn, a great Texan, a great American, husband, father, friend. We pray for him as he rests, his beautiful wife, Amber, and his children. And today I ask, in the spirit of our faith, my members would join me in a moment of silence for the passing of Steve Mostyn. I thank you. Amen.
What purpose does the gentlewoman from Florida seek recognition?
Would have voted nay on roll call number 637.
Without objection, the gentlewoman's request is on record. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. President, I seek to address the chamber for 1 minute.
Without objection, you are recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the realm of humanity, that which is cobbled together by humans is rarely perfect, and so too, the tax reform that we undertook today is not perfect. However, it was overdue and it's good, and candidly, any legislation contemplated that was last addressed when I weighed 112 pounds and had a full head of hair is long since overdue. Having said that, I can find some fault, and I would submit that it is with the confidence and belief in the leadership of this chamber and the relevant committees that we will discuss the maintenance of the historic preservation tax credit, which is included in the Senate version of this bill, that I cast my ballot today. I think that's a worthwhile investment in revitalizing downtrodden areas, and I want to make my voice known publicly, loudly, and on the record. I also hope that members of this body on both sides of the aisle would consider the opportunity for students to remove themselves from the dark cloud of student loan debt by virtue of reviewing the Student Security Act that will be unveiled here within the next 24 hours. With that, I yield back my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What happened today on this floor was a massive tax break for the wealthiest people in our country. Over half of the tax dollars will go to people in the upper 1% of the income strata. And the big pot of gold at the end is eliminating the inheritance tax by the year 2024, so that the heirs of the richest will get millions and hundreds of millions and billions of tax relief. This bill should have been geared toward the middle class. The middle class is getting change, tip change, from a cheap restaurant, while the millionaires and the billionaires are getting away with no AMT tax, changed rates at the top, inheritance tax changes. They get the money. The middle class gets shafted. It's a con job. It's a shame. I yield back the balance of my time.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor the life of Korean War veteran Jack Tolbert, who passed away this month at the age of 94. He's a longtime resident of Redding, California, over 50 years. Originally a Texas native, Jack was. He's awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his heroism in Korea, which in 1953, at his post in South Korea, came under attack. A Chinese soldier hurled a grenade into Sergeant Tolbert's bunker. In an incredible moment of selfless bravery, Jack hurled himself on the grenade to shield his fellow soldiers from the explosion and injury or even death. Jack, he lost both his legs in that, among numerous other injuries. Though he would never admit it himself, he truly was a hero for having done so and protecting his brothers in arms. But I knew him personally, and it was always a joy to see Jack at the various events around Shasta County and the Redding area. He's always full of joy, had a joke for you, a slap on the back, and he never let whatever his condition might be get him down. He was always one of the most positive people in the room and a joy to be around. We will miss him dearly, but we're all blessed to have him in our lives, whether it was his service in Korea or his time as our neighbor in Shasta County. God bless him and his family. I yield back.
What purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, let us never forget that the GOP tax scam will harm real people. On Tuesday afternoon, 42 high school students from the Crystal Ray Newark High School were here at the Capitol urging me to vote against the GOP tax scam. Mr. Speaker, the young people I met with are from financially struggling families. They worked hard and got accepted into an innovative school. To gain professional skills, the students take part in a corporate work-study program. Their earnings go towards their college preparatory education. The model works. Last year, 100% of Crystal Ray's Newark students were accepted into four-year colleges. But under the GOP tax scam, these bright young people from financially disadvantaged families will have to pay taxes on their work-study earnings, taxes they cannot afford. That is wrong. I will continue to stand up against the GOP tax scam and stand for programs that benefit America's children. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from North Carolina seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, the gentlewoman's request is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in recognition of National Bible Week. For thousands of years, the Bible's been a source of guidance and strength for humanity. During times of turmoil and confusion, I can think of no more important source of comfort than the wisdom provided in the good book. The Bible serves as a profound influence in my life as well as others in this chamber, and many of us gather weekly for prayer breakfast and Bible study. The Bible offers us hope when circumstances are dire and is a source of strength when human frailty brings us low. As we read in the Gospel of Matthew, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Next week, as we celebrate Thanksgiving, my prayer is that it will be a time of healing and unity for all. As we reflect on the blessings God has provided, I hope we will also celebrate the gift God provides us daily through his holy word. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Request to speak for 1 minute on the floor of the House and to reserve the right to amend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Just a few minutes ago, on the floor of the House of Representatives, we saw a vote on what has been called the middle-class tax cut. And unfortunately, I'm here to remind all of us, Mr. Speaker, that it really is a tax scam. Because when we've looked into the many communities across America, hardworking families, like the hardworking families in the district that I represent in California, the average family or household that files a tax return every April 15th
makes an average income of about $69,000, and that family, according to what was just passed off of this floor, is going to be leaving behind over $1,000 more than they normally would have when they do their taxes. And that hurts, ladies and gentlemen. That family is a hard-working family. That family cannot afford to miss out on $1,000 of their hard-earned money. But I heard people say earlier today that that wasn't going to happen, and that's just not true. I yield back.
Expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The House has just only moments ago passed historic tax reform. I'm proud to have supported it. In conference, we will have the opportunity to even approve the bill, but there is one issue I'd like to raise for them, and that is closing the Bermuda loophole. Basically how it works is that a company located in Bermuda strips revenue out of its U.S. branch. Then it invests that revenue under Bermuda tax law, meaning that the company pays virtually nothing in taxes on that income, and it's a crippling advantage. Companies that stay in America are getting killed. We've had two massive inversions in the last 2 years to Bermuda and to Switzerland. The number of foreign property casualty insurers in the top 25 has increased 7-fold since 1990. Closing this loophole is in the Senate bill, and it was in the last House tax reform proposal. It also raises $8.7 billion in revenue. That, in addition to the countless jobs and proud American businesses that it would save. We can't have a tax code that destroys American business. We have got to close this loophole. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The chair will recognize members for special order speeches without prejudice to the resumption of legislative business. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, the gentleman